There, this is my company, Sona Health. Thank you all for coming and taking time out of your busy days. I'm going to try and get to this as fast as I can here now that we've gone through the technical part of it. So there we go. And let's see first. So the big question here is why REMS? But first, let's review what we all know, DEXA a little bit. What is, what does DEXA actually even stand for? Well, there you go. It's dual energy X-ray absorptiometry. What does that mean? So you have two X-ray beams that are shot through you. So that's the dual energy in the X-ray part. And then what's measured is how much those X-ray beams are absorbed by your bone, because that's how X-ray and bone work. Um, when you see the white bone on that black film or on the the screen, that means that the X-ray hasn't actually hit the screen, so it stays white. Everywhere else, it's hit the screen. So all the black, all the gray, all the whatever, those are all X-rays hitting the screen, and so they get different energy levels because they're being absorbed at different rates. But that's why bone is really good absorption for X-ray. So that's yeah. So then if the X-rays go through you and they're not absorbed as much, then you've got less dense bone. Because the more dense you are, the more the bone will absorb the X-ray. And that's just what I explained. But it's still X-ray, right? So it's radiation. And some people say, well, it's little, but yeah, but radiation, the way radiation works is that it's accumulative throughout your lifetime. So every little bit you add on gets added on to your exposure rate throughout your life. And so it's accumulative all through your life. So you don't want to be wasting your safe accumulation level on just anything. So, you want to keep it for x-rays that you really need to have. You measure the bone at the reference axial sites at the lumbar spine and the femoral neck. That's the general way of doing DEXA, same as REMS. And it's currently the gold standard. We like to say it's the only standard at the moment because nobody else has come up against it. So by acclamation, it's the gold standard. But there are some problems with DEXA. I'm not sure if anyone knows these, but this is the problem more for the owners. They're expensive and to maintain. It's lots of money. Requires a dedicated exam room. Lots of money again. And the hip and spine measurement errors are in the range of 5 to 10%. Now, the outcome is strongly influenced by patient positioning. So that's one of the error rates, and that positioning error rates are about 90% of all the errors in positioning are in the femoral neck versus 80% in the spinal. So it's not much better for the spine. There's a high rate of reporting errors or data analysis errors affecting the BMD value. 64% are those are in the spine, and 48% in the femoral neck. So because of these negative results, the international guidelines recommend that DEXA scans start at 65 if no other specific risk factors are present. So if you're not, no one in your family has osteoporosis, you don't have risk factors for osteoporosis, their guideline is to start you at 65. And because it's ionizing radiation and has a low sensitivity to bone mass changes, the follow-up exams for an osteoporosis positive or at-risk patient are only recommended about every 18 months or 24 months to 36 months maximum, making treatment monitoring pretty difficult. You can't, it's hard to do something for 2 to 3 years before you figure out if what you're doing is helpful. And that's another 2 or 3 years that to figure out if that was helpful once you make changes. So it's not a very good not a very good system that way. Now, here's something you really need to think about. 50% of all major orthopedic fractures are occurring in individuals with normal to near normal BMD studies or density results. That's that's kind of alarming because we expect those with normal results not to fracture. That's the model. Conversely, there are many individuals with osteoporosis who don't experience fracture. So there are 50% of all major, so the 50% is the people with high density. So therefore fractures are happening to people, the other 50% people with low density. So you can refer from that fractures are happening regardless of density. And that's right in the face of the current model, right? Current model is your low density, high risk for fracture. High density, very low risk for fracture. You're safe, right? And that's not what's happened. But why is this? You know, I'm sure you're all asking. um, the next question should be: is there a bone attribute that we're not measuring that would make this equation sound make more sense? And it's a resounding yes, there is. Bone quality or bone strength. But how can this be measured? We thought we were measuring it when we were doing density. Obviously, we haven't been measuring bone strength, but density is not bone strength. So the solution is this REM technology by Echolight. The Echolight is the company, the Italian company that invented it, and REMS is the technology that they invented. And the machine is called the EchoS. This is what it looks like outside of its carrying case. So it looks like a Roomba vacuum with a little tail on it. And this is what it looks like. It'll look like when I bring it to the center. And when you're having your scan, that's exactly what it's going to look like. It just carries in a suitcase and I pull it behind me and I get it on the plane and I come here with it and go there with it and open it up and away we go. So what's the EchoS? Let's take a look at that. So it's the only non-invasive proprietary ultrasound solution for bone strength assessment in the early diagnosis of osteoporosis, the spine and hip. So it measures the exact same thing that DEXA does. But it also assesses the bone microarchitecture, not just the density. And these are two different things. This is what you're going to take something away from this talk. Those are two different things. Directly comparable to high-end DEXA, so DEXA that's done right, 94% correlation with greater measurement precision, though. It sees the bone in greater detail. And this was from a 15,000 plus patient multi-center trial in Europe. It's radiation free because it's ultrasound, and it's significantly more sensitive to bone mass changes than DEXA. It'll see changes much quicker than DEXA. We'll go over that later, but I'll just let you know it's about 4 to 6 months it can see change. DEXA, as we saw, was about 2 to 3 years. It's portable, so I can bring it to you. You don't have to go to a center. You can go to a more comfortable place, like where you're used to working or where you're used to whatever. I could even go to your house if need be, that kind of thing. It's much lower cost than a DEXA system, and there's no facility requirements. You can do it anywhere. I've done this in the sunshine on somebody's porch. I've done this in multiple different types of rooms. I've done this in people's homes. They're laying on a couch and doing this. I've done it everywhere. And there's no patient positioning problems, no errors there. It's fully automated. So there's no eliminating inter and intra-operator variability. So eliminating the reporting and the operator, the actual, like myself, the variability. Just to let you know, I have done follow-up studies of REMS from North Carolina. And about a year later, when I was in Tennessee doing this for people there, and the results were so comparable. It was very exciting to see and an experience. And that's a totally different operator, totally different piece of equipment. Absolutely very comparable results a year later. The density went down a little bit as you would expect. The fragility either stayed the same or went up or went down depending on their activity level. The exam times are very short. They require about 2 minutes to obtain the actual data, and then a few minutes, probably 4 minutes or so, 5 minutes to acquire, like for the system to actually come up with the report. So it's very quick. And yeah, so they're generated immediately. There's no radiologist required. You don't have to wait a week to get your results. But also evaluates the quality of the bone, internal microarchitecture, and expresses it numerically as a fragility score. So the lower the score, the less fragile you are. Okay, so you want to be closer to zero. It's from 0 to 100. And that's figured out, and this is very important to remember. That score is figured out independent of density. So density has nothing to do with how fragile or strong your bone is with this calculation. The report contains all the existing DEXA parameters, so your BMD score, your T score, your Z score, but it also will give you the fragility score, and it will provide you with a 5-year fracture risk for the site you're doing. For the spine, it'll do major orthopedic fractures, which include the spine, the shoulder, and the hip. And for the hip, it's just the hip. So, what are the effects on clinical practice with this thing? Accessibility, earlier prevention and diagnosis in primary care settings. It's suitable for mass screening, and it's safe for everybody because it's ultrasound. It's more reliable. It's based on actual bone strength, not BMD. Also for mass screening, if any of you are out there with scoliosis and you've had, either they won't do you in DEXA, they won't do your scan because they can't, or if they do it, you end up with really wacky results. It can do scoliosis. It's not hampered by any of those things that hampered DEXA, such as osteoarthritis, degenerative disc disease, uh, previous fractures, and I just forgot the word, but a lot of other bone issues that plague DEXA will give the wrong data for them to report that doesn't affect this system. And it's more reliable. It's based on actual bone strength, not on density. It's more effective therapeutic monitoring because of its increased sensitivity to bone mass changes. It makes it suitable for repeated measurements over short interval times. And that's very important when you're trying to figure out what you're doing is correct or you want to follow your progress. It's a lot easier to do something for 6 months than it is for 2 to 3 years. And you get better compliance during shorter periods of months. So improved clinical decisions. So earlier detection leads to more timely correlation of lifestyles or drug therapy prescriptions, if you're into that, thereby avoiding the significant costs associated with treatment post fracture. Much more expensive to treat you once you fractured your hip or your spine. So with this uh, thing, it's not so much that you're going to read all these things and see which ones are yes and no's and highs and greens. It's, well, how many reds and how many greens do you see? In DEXA, we see a lot of red. Red is like anything else. It's a warning. It's not very good, and very little green with DEXA, right? In REMS, we see all green. So what they've done is they've taken all these issues here that are red and they've gotten rid of them. They've improved on them so that it's all green. So now you've got a system that's very reliable and repeatable. This is a nice. I like this slide because it really shows you in a nutshell sort of REMS versus DEXA versus in the vertebrae and the femur. So here we can see how well it sees the bone. So that's pretty good, grams per centimeter squared. But look at how much more detail REM sees the bone, right? We're talking in the neighborhood of tens to hundreds times better. Um, and that's for both, right? So it's just seeing the bone in a much greater detail. The interoperator repeatability, here it is for DEXA, all right? It doesn't look too bad, but when you compare it to REMS at less than 0.5% versus basically 2%, that's a huge difference, right? That's over 4 times or 400% improvement on that. Same with over here. Now it's not as bad for the femur, but it's 1.5%. So it's a little improved, but still way under, way under, 0.5% for REMS. And then the least significant change. This means how small of a change can it see between, in difference down the road. Well, here you see it's like 5.5%, 4%. So 4 to almost 6% is what DEXA needs is that what DEXA needs to see any change in the bone. So you've got to lose 4 to 6% of your bone density for DEXA to actually detect it. Okay. So if you're going every 6 months or every year to DEXA, that's almost not worth your time because you don't lose bone density that quickly. So it's not going to generally it's not going to see any different. It shouldn't. But you can see what REMS is like. Again, 0.8, 1%. It's like a fraction of what DEXA is doing. So this translates into the 2 to 3 years versus the 4 to 6 months. That's the translation in percentage for that. And this one, they didn't do any research on the DEXA for the intraoperator, but again, you can see between operators, it's 0.5%. So, and as I demonstrated with the cases that I did follow up to North Carolina, you can see that it bears out, right? The results were extremely comparable. Now, I'd like us to learn a little about development of bone density because a lot of people don't understand how bone density works over your lifetime. What we want to understand is that everyone starts out in osteoporosis. Every baby that's born has osteoporosis. Okay, the bones are not dense at all. Then we increases throughout your life until about approximately age 30. And after that, you start losing it. Everybody loses it. Men, women, everybody. Okay? Nobody's exempt. Now, what may happen though is how fast and how high you build your bone density depends on activities level, your diet, your sex, your health, your BMI during the formative years. So all these things go together and they form how fast and how much bone density you're actually going to produce. Not everybody gets to normal. I'll just tell you that right now. Not everybody gets the same height. Some people get massive bone density. Some people don't get much. It's not like you're losing the game. That's just the way it is for you. Uh, but hopefully by the end you'll be clear that bone density really is not the problem. Men tend to gain bone density faster at increased levels than women. They're bigger, they're heavier, they do more, those big muscle sports, that kind of thing. That is changing a bit, in our lifetime, but they still are bigger and heavier. You're not going to get a ton of women that are as big as some of the big men out there. The sooner positive level of lifestyle choices you make and are implemented in your lifetime, the greater the gain. Plain and simple. So your mother was right. Get out there and play, get out there and do stuff, eat your vegetables, that kind of thing. That was all correct, even though we didn't know why. So this is a typical bone density graph. And you can see here, this one here is male. So you see they're up a little higher. They climbed a little faster. The female one is the dark line here. Then they hit menopause and they get even worse, right? I mean, we're already on a downhill trajectory, but then women get a little faster downhill here. And then this one here is suboptimal lifestyle factors. This one could also be called, you know, um, very slight people, small people, especially women. And you're going to see soon why. And you can see this person never made it out of osteoporosis, right? They got real close. Maybe they popped into osteopenia, but then they went right back in. And now they're in osteoporosis. And then this, they're coming by and they see me here, and then they've got osteoporosis, and they go, "Oh my gosh, I was hoping I didn't have that. I was hoping up here, but you were never up here. So don't have that expectation that you were ever there." I think with this system, every 30-year-old should get a baseline so they have a much better idea of where they're going to go and where they came from. Very few people start up here and end up way down here. It's just the slope isn't that bad unless you've got some really wacky, funked out um, bone density problems. That's not going to happen. You're going to go down in a very gentle slope. Um, and so it depends on how high you get. So if you don't get very high, you're not, you know, if you're always in osteoporosis, you're always in osteoporosis, and that's just the way it is. But you're going to see that that's not the end of the world by a big shot. So what happens with low BMI for females? Right? Well, you get low BMI. Your genetics, it could be because of your genetics, you're slight, you're thin, it could be because of your diet, you don't eat a lot, or it could be because you're super active and you burn off all your calories and maybe you're not chucking in as many um, calories, to keep up with your burning. But anyways, either way, you end up with low BMI. So what that causes is it's going to affect your menses because in order to have to have menarche or your first period, you have to have about 18% body fat. And if you don't, you're not going to start. And then to maintain all that, to then have regular menses, you need to have 22. So you got to get fatter. You need to have 22% fat, roughly, in order to maintain. So, and if you don't, then your estrogen's gonna be decreased as well. And then what happens when you have decreased estrogen? There you go. When you have decreased estrogen, you have decreased bone density. You may never leave the state of osteoporosis. Hence what I was saying about that curve. You can't create bone density. You can't increase it without your estrogen. So, how bad can this be? Well, because osteoporosis is the most important risk factor in the calculation of fracture risk. Take into consideration the fat percentage of these female athletes. Okay? And we're watching a lot of them at the Olympics right now. Okay? Bodybuilders, 10 to 15%. Remember, you got to have 18, you got to have 22. Cycling, 15 to 20. Gymnastics. These people have the strongest bones on earth. But look at them. They couldn't possibly have high density bone. But have you ever, are we in any fear when we're watching these Olympics today and, this week and next week? Is anyone fearing that these people are going to break anything? Never. Marathon runners, 10 to 15. They're right down there gymnasts. They're not as strong bone, but they're pretty strong. Soccer players, they're edging up. They're edging up. Rowers, high and long jumpers. Again, these people are all highly active. They're doing things that stress their bone out. And as you can see, all of these athletes don't meet the body fat requirement to have normal or regular menses. They're all high risk for low bone density, right? Because of their affected menses, their low estrogen level. And many of them may be in osteoporosis. All of them are at low risk for fracture. So what affects your curve, right? Your bone density curve? Well, level of activity and the initial age, right? So are you out there running? Are you out there? Are you, maybe studying more? You're watching TV, you're couch potato, or you're just not into activity, so you're doing other, more sedentary things. Your diet, right? Are you eating the right things? Are you eating a lot of junk food, fast food, all this stuff? Are you eating nice, healthy things? Fruits and vegetables, that kind of thing. Do you have health issues? Or, can you not drink milk? Can you not, eat whole wheat bread and all that kind of stuff? Do you smoke? And then what's your BMI like? Do you have high fat content? Do you have high muscle content? All that kind of thing. Right? So what can you do to increase your bone density if you really want to do that? That's important to you. You got to eat a diet high in vegetables. There's lots of nutrients in vegetables that'll help increase your density. You got to perform osteogenic loading, such as what you're doing at the wellness center with the biodensity system. You got to consume enough protein. Also, the osteogenic loading is also weight training as well, weight bearing exercises, and one of the favorite exercises, one of the really good exercises, is jumping. Consume enough protein. A lot of people don't consume enough protein. You got to consume that protein because protein is the building blocks, to build this stuff. You got to have a diet high in calcium and high quality supplements if you can't drink the milk or eat the cheese or that kind of thing. But there's vegetables out there that have high calcium levels as well, like spinach, I think, and broccoli, and those kinds of things are fairly high in calcium. I mean, all you got to do is look at a silverback gorilla and figure out he's getting his calcium from somewhere. Yeah, he eats ants, but that's a lot of ants if you have to eat meat. He's getting it from his vegetables, right? There's a lot of vegetables in there, so he's getting lots. There's very few, primates out there who are stronger than a silverback gorilla, and they're vegetarians. So, you don't have to eat the meat, but that's one of the easier ways of getting it. You get plenty of vitamin D and vitamin K. Vitamin D, if you don't want to sit in the sun, which is the only way you can get it, you take the supplements. Avoid low calorie diets. Okay? Counting those calories, and that's not very helpful. Collagen supplements. Collagen builds a lot of things. Collagen is a building block for a lot of stuff: muscle, bone, a lot of your connective tissue. All has collagen in it. Maintain stable, healthy weight. None of the yo-yo stuff, right? Include foods high in magnesium and zinc. Consume foods high in omega-3 fats. We've heard all that before. Eliminate smoking and decrease your caffeine. A lot of people probably don't want to do that, the caffeine part. There is a component of bone health which up to now has not been measured. That is bone strength, quantified as a number expressed as a fragility score. The lower the number, the less fragile your bone is. So REMS also measures bone strength. So what's the importance of bone strength, the calculation of fracture risk? Now, this is not important to actually look at the numeric value of the little graph bar. It's to show you sort of the difference that fragility plays versus density plays in fracture risk. Okay. So density plays a part. It's small. DEXA would have you believe it's everything. It's not. Fragility is actually directly related to fracture risk, whereas density is more distantly related to it. So the best way to measure how your fragility is progressing with the lowest chance of error is with a REM scan. It calculates the bone fragility score from multiple aspects of the bone, and here they are. That's a lot of things. This system is doing all that. It's looking at your bone under all those headings for 80 seconds in the spine and 40 seconds in the hip. And it's assessing how strong your bone is after looking at all those things, as well as the density, right? Notice you don't see density here, right? You don't see that here. None of it. So that's very important. You have to remember is density does not play a part in bone strength. And we have very exciting news for you people using the osteogenic loading system. We now have data which demonstrates how fragility and density changes over a 4-month period. So fragility score and bone density data of osteogenic loading clients over a 4-month follow-up. And this is what we got. So on the femoral neck, the percent of clients who increased in the fragility score was 69% of people increased their fragility score in the neck of the femur in 4 months. I just wanted to push the envelope. I like doing that. I've been in this game for a long time. They tell me 6 months. I'm going to say, well, really? Well, you've got to be seeing changes. It can't be like nothing, 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 nothing. 6 months we see change. You got to see some change. How much change do you see? So I was able to do this, and I was quite impressed and quite excited by this. And in the spine, it was a little less. We'll go over why that might be, but it's 44% still. So almost half of everybody, that went over this 4 months increased their fragility score in their spine. The mean percent increase was about 8% for the femoral neck and about 1.3% for the spine. Now remember, this is only 4 months. Now, when it came to density, it was reversed, exactly reversed. More people increased density in the spine than over the hip. We'll see why later. But the main percent increases was quite a bit larger, right? 9.7% and 5.1%. Very exciting stuff. You should all be very excited about that. So here's the analysis of why that might be happening, all of those numbers. We figure more clients experience an increase in fragility score in the hip over the spine due to the ease of performing leg-based exercises compared to spine-based exercises. This would also explain the mean percent increase as well. Alternatively, more clients were experiencing an increase in bone density for the spine over the hip, probably due to the predetermined sequence of calcium absorption. So the hip experienced an increase in mean percentage of bone density, probably due to the increase in performing leg exercises. But what you have to understand is the body will decide. It has a predetermined uh, path of which things happen when they're happening on such a broad scale. So when you go to lose weight, there's no exercise you can do to force the body to lose weight in that specific area. Okay. When you lose weight, the body decides where it's taking the fat stores from first and where it's putting them back first. Okay. It does that. It's doing the same thing here with your calcium or your bone density. And we found the reverse was the same when we're looking at, it tended to happen in slight women where a lot of them, their spines were more dense than their hips. So the body, again, rather than what it was taking first, it usually reverses that and it lets it go last. So what we saw and what we're seeing a lot with slim women is that many of them, their body's protecting the core area and allowing the calcium to be reabsorbed from the hips or the extremities before the spine. But what does this mean for RAMs of frequency for follow-up? Well, as with all programs, or most programs designed to improve your health, regular follow-up assessments of progress in the shortest possible interval drastically increases your probability of success. Okay. If you're not following up on things and you're not changing things and you're not on a regular short-term basis, your chance for success shrinks. Right. So you want to do it as fast as you can, as often as you can. So in order to properly manage expectations, though, it has to be understood that results may differ from client to client. Not everybody reacts the same way to the same stimulus. Okay. You have so many different attributes to yourself that control that reaction that are different than everyone else's, that it couldn't possibly be the same. Okay. So don't get too worried. It just, be patient. I tell everybody that it's like a big pendulum, right? A big pendulum swing. And on the left side, that's usually the longest side. And that's trying to slow down the degenerative process. That sometimes takes a while. Some people will be quick, and some people will take an extraordinary amount of time. And you might say, "Oh no, this is not working." Blah blah blah. Have some patience. You can look at a score, and let's say we do REMS on you today, and in 6 months from now we do another REMS. It got a little worse, but you don't know how much it would have gotten worse if you hadn't done what you were doing, right? So we go for the next one, which is a year out, and it maybe gets a little worse, but a little less worse, right? If you're following what I'm saying. Um, so maybe one was 5% worse. Now it's 2% worse. It's slowing down. The degenerative process is slowing down. So you have to look at different things in the scope that they should be looked at. And then you might find that the 18-month scan, nothing happened, right? There was no gain, there was no loss. Well, now you've entered that shortest part usually, which is the plateauing, right? Your body's just not, it's not losing, but it's not gaining yet either. It's kind of stationary and it's waiting to figure things out. And then you start on the other side and you start to gain, right? And that could be a long process too. I mean, you're not going to gain forever, but you may and another, but you will start to gain hopefully. And that it all depends on how well you're doing these things, how often you're doing these things. Um, do you come every week? Do you put maximum effort in? All these things, like that's all up to you. And that's, is your diet good? Is your, yeah, all these other things that we talked about, that kind of thing. Do you have other, other medical problems, like other medical issues? That's all going to impact the swing, right? The pendulum swing. Um, but you have to be committed. You have to be committed to regularly scheduled program to ensure your highest opportunity for success. If you're not committed, it's not going to work. So you can't blame the system. REMS is the only technology available sensitive enough um, to accurately assess the echogenic loading programs within a 4 to 6 month window of time. DEXA, as we said, takes 1.5 to 3 years to actually measure any change. That's not a doable model. And then it only measures density and not the really important score of fragility. By the way, full disclosure, I used to run a DEXA. Um, I don't anymore because I couldn't when I'm promoting this, I cannot then go tell someone to go have a DEXA when I don't firmly believe that DEXA is really helpful with all its errors and all that stuff. So I don't own the DEXA anymore. I sold it. I just put all my efforts into this. So I have come from a DEXA. Yeah, I didn't operate this thing, but I owned it. I had people running it. I understood it. It's funny when I owned one, I didn't understand it as well as I should have, and I suspect that's true of most owners. They just they have the ability to run it. That people are going to pay for it. It's a business, right? They're not too much worried about it's established technology apparently, and they don't worry too much about whether it's a good technology or not because they just assume that it is because it's the gold standard. So you don't have to worry about these things. Now you do. There's a new kid on the block. So what might all this mean concerning your REMS report? Well, your REMS and DEXA T-score values are highly correlative, okay? And they have similar diagnostic accuracy. So they can be compared. But the DEXA has to be done right, right? As we've seen, DEXA has a high level of error. And we'll go over that in a second. REMS has drastically reduced the possibility of error occurrences over DEXA. That's fabulous news. So in a recent study in the UK, 1,855 patients, the REM spine and hip scores were found to be less discordant or different than DEXA scores. I don't know how many of you had, but I've seen them when people bring in their scores to me. And you might have the worst one I saw was they had absolutely normal hips, and then they had severe osteoporosis in their spine. And I said, I just looked at it and went, this is not possible. They're too discordant. They're too way out. They're too different. I mean, just think about it. How does your body go, I'm not going to take any density from the hips at all, and I'm going to take it all from the spine? That doesn't even make sense. I mean, unless you've got some rare disease that does some whacked out thing on your spine, I don't know how that occurs. So I immediately says, one of these scores is wrong. Let's figure out which one. And it was the spine. She was actually normal density in both spine and hips. So that was, great news for her. But you could see, but the thing is most people inside the system don't really know what the system is doing, don't know what they're looking at because that slid by. And even the specialist who was reviewing the report, it didn't click her either that this doesn't make sense, right? Um, because there's no questioning of the service when you're in the service. Why question it? There's no reason to. And so there is very little questioning. There's very little knowledge of what's going on, about how high the error rates are. So unfortunately, but now we've got REMS. Hopefully that's going to change. It already has in Italy. Italy no longer uses DEXA. So you can see that it can happen. It has happened. And Europe is not far behind. A lot of European countries, the EU countries, are using this system. Japan, Australia, Brazil, and now Canada and the United States. Well, I think getting back to this, so you got these, they're less discordant. That means DEX is more discordant. And this suggests that REMS has the potential to enhance, okay? Then this is the language of the researchers. Potential to enhance diagnostic accuracy considerably. Okay. These findings combined with the comparable accuracy rates uh, allows for the utilization of REMS to potentially improve current medical practice and enhance patient care. Now, isn't that great news? That's fabulous news. It is not uncommon to have different results due to the error rate of DEXA. So then when we come in there and you say, well, here's my DEXA results and here's my, and then we say, well, here's what REM says you have. Given the drastically reduced opportunities for error with REMS, it can be considered to be the more reliable score. Okay. And what I say to people is never assume that your DEXA report is error free, even if it's been consistent. Consistency does not mean error free. It just means you're doing it the same way, which is nice, but you can be consistently wrong. There was a study in 2019 that showed that DEXA error rate was vastly improved with the application of a reporting template, meaning automation. The conclusion of the study indicated that DEXA's technical and interpretation errors were extremely common. This is their language, extremely common. Does that, like, how do you have faith in this thing? Like when I read stuff like this, and I was like, I'm going, well, what am I doing here? Why am I offering this to people when the error rates are so common that you don't know what you're getting? You really, really don't with a DEXA. You could be getting a good one, or you could be getting a bad one. And you don't know this because you're not a medical professional, most of us, and we can't challenge the doctor's ability to read. That comes from other people. But the studies can, and the studies show this is not. The interesting thing is when they do a study comparing DEXA to REMS, they have to first ensure that they have good DEXA operators. And they test them and they compare them and they see whether they're doing them in the proper way. But they have to do that first with DEXA in order for it to be able to be compared to REMS. Interesting, correct? But that's what they have to do because there's so many out there that aren't doing it right. But so the implementation of a reporting template reduces major errors and should become commonplace. This is what they're saying. These studies are recommending this, that they should be putting a template in every REMS, but they're not every REMS, sorry, DEXA, but they're not doing that. Okay. Some doctors have a hard time letting go of that ability to interpret. So, but what you have to understand is REMS is the ultimate in reporting template. It's all done automatically. There's no doctor involved. There's no human involved in assessing that data. As soon as you involve humans, I'm not saying doctors are bad at reporting. I'm just saying it's been proven that they're not that great reporting DEXA scans. And then it only reports density anyways. So really, even if you did it all right, it was always done right. What's the big, you're not getting the most important information, which is the fragility score. So here's some recommendations. Initial REM scan should be considered a baseline and not compared directly with DEXA just because the increased error rates of DEXA. Like if they're vastly different, don't worry about it. Probably know why that is. The DEXA is not that great. Just take your baseline and then work towards your next scan. Continue to engage in your exercise program for bone health improvement. Continue, do the osteogenic loading with the bone density system, with the biodensity system. Do your supplemental stuff with weight bearing exercises and other activities that you do. So, in order to monitor the progression and make any adjustments as required to your program, regular repeat scans should be done every 4 to 6 months. I think 6 months is fine. This is the only test with enough sensitivity to measure fragility score and density without the increased error rate experienced with DEXA. I hope you're getting the message. DEXA has a lot of error rates. The error rate in DEXA is really high. So the future of bone assessment is here. I'm glad to announce, made possible by my company with the EchoS. Now, one more thing. I would highly recommend you view the following video by Dr. Doug Lucas, who is a retired orthopedic surgeon. He's in North Carolina. He's frustrated with the traditional medical model, as I am. He now runs the only physician-led program in the country, focusing exclusively on bone health through his online Optimal Bone Health MD. And that's the YouTube address. You can go and watch this thing. It's very informative. He's a very good speaker. And he knows his stuff. He's really a champion of REMS. I highly recommend it. But there you go. That's my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it. I will stop sharing the screen here so we can maybe have some questions.
Yay, thank you so much, Dave. That was so informative. So we will open the floor to questions. You can write them in in the chat or raise your hand. And we do already have one question, which is from Sherry Blackston in the chat. So how does REMS compare with the trabecular bone score on DEXA? So DEXA does have the ability to have an add-on trabecular bone score feature.
Right.
From our
Yeah.
we've heard that only about 10% of DEXAs have incorporated this add-on technology in America.
Right. Right.
So do you have any experience to speak to that, Dave?
Yeah. And Dr. Lucas speaks to that too. But trabecular bone score is their method of trying to figure out how strong the bone is. But guess what they use? One of the aspects that they use to figure that out is density. So they're all in on density. And then also I think size of bone. And it's they combine and they'll say, well, here's how strong the bone is, right? Because they think that the model is density is 100% of the problem. And when I was a DEXA person, I was drinking the Kool-Aid too, and I just accepted that, didn't research it, didn't question it, that kind of thing. So I totally have a different view now on density and where its rightful place is. I'm not saying it's totally nothing, but it's completely. I think it's a much more diminished attribute of bone health than fragility, because as you saw on that one screen, there was no density there when they figured out their fragility. So density didn't even enter into it. And as you saw on the on that one graph also, which showed where we all started from, right? We all were in osteoporosis at one point in our life when we were born. So it's just a natural progression. It goes up and it comes back down, right? That's just the way life works. But is it the controlling factor? And I firmly believe it is not.
Thank you. Thanks for that question, Dr. Blackstein. So if anyone else has questions, if you go to the bottom of your screen where it says react, there's a raise your hand button. And if you want to raise it, we will ask you a question.
Another question here by Sherry Blackstein. Do you ever see normal DEXA with poor REMS results?
Yeah, we do see it the other way. It's always a little harder to present that to a client because, of course, they see it as failure, and they see it as, they again, they're making the assumption that the DEXA was correct, right? When I see a drastic decrease in density from DEXA, I will caution them and say, well, wait, let's look at your fragility score before we get all worked up. Because remember, DEXA doesn't talk about this. So we'll go look at the fragility score. And a lot of times um, that can be fairly good. That could be in the normal or in the transitional zone, we call it, is sort of the area between normal and fragile. So I try to caution them that. And then I also say, well, it looks like your DEXA wasn't reported correctly. Um, and you look, and sometimes when I look at them, like I'm getting pretty good at guessing what people might be, like just by their body type and their size and all that kind of weight, all that kind of thing. So I'm not generally surprised. I am sometimes. I have had tiny women that actually have some really dense bone, and I'm just wow, that's incredible. I'm not sure how you did that, but good on you. And also the strength sometimes is really good too at that time as well because they're very active and they're also that kind of thing. So, but yeah, I would. That's how I would look at it.
Thank you. Chris is wondering if we can get a copy of your presentation from today.
I think so. I think it's still recording. So once I stop recording, we can. Well, I can probably send that out to you guys. Now, you guys also have the one I sent you, um, that kind of thing. So if this one doesn't work, I don't know. Sometimes like I've done these presentations lots, but I'm not super, you know, well, this isn't my wheelhouse. I don't know how it always works. That kind of like normally when I'm on these things, I'm not investigating how they work really well. So I'm just kind of
No
getting,
worries.
as you saw at the beginning, you know, that kind of thing. So it is recording still. So I'm
Yeah.
hopeful that it will, that I'll be able to send it out.
Well, we're happy to help and we are recording and we will make sure that everyone can get a copy if they would like.
Great.
So a couple questions by Judith Allen. I can answer the first one. So how close are you to having insurance coverage for the cost? So after talking to the Echolight team, we've received the update that in America, it's about 18 to 24 months out
Hmm,
before they're expecting CPT codes to be approved. So we're still several
that's
months away
good.
from that. Fingers will
Yeah.
be crossed for everybody.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then her other question is, how accepted is this test by orthopedic and neurosurgeons?
How effective is this test? It's very good because and I've talked to some orthopedic surgeons, like they'll go in, and the with the current model, they'll go in, person's supposed to have these rotten bones because they've got osteoporosis, and they'll go in to do work, and they're just amazed at how healthy the bone is, and they'll say, well, no, that bone doesn't look weak at all. So they've been kind of figuring it out, and it's funny that orthopedic surgeons, there's two of them now in North Carolina that have really attached themselves to REMS, because they see the bone with their own eyes and they can make that assessment. Um, and they also know what this person got, how they scored in density with the DEXA. And they're just saying, these two things aren't the same. So they're figuring it out that there's something here that's not getting measured, and density can't be the only measurement of bone health or, the most important one.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have a raised hand from our dear
All
friend
right.
Greg in Florida, fellow
Oh, wow.
OsteoStrong owner.
Okay.
Hi, Dave.
Oh,
Hi.
Hi.
unmute. Yay.
Yeah, Dave, thank you so much for the excellent presentation. Just fantastic. Well, this is one of the things I've been looking for is actually the clinical research on bone quality versus bone density.
Right.
And I'd like to reach out to you if you actually have any clinical research that I could share with some of the
Um,
orthopedics in my area, because that's been a bit of a difficulty
yeah,
to try to get
right,
discussions
right,
with them because they are so heavily entrenched in bone density versus good TBS scores. So do you have
exactly.
any clinical research that I
Um, yeah, I mean, there's research on these systems on how they're showing how well they compare to DEXA and the fragility score. There is a good research on that, but you have to remember most research is done through the lens of density is strength, right? And
right,
that's sort of their lens right now. So it's really hard to find stuff that says no, it's not, because you're challenging the gold standard, right?
right,
And the
right.
gold standard is based 100% on density. So I've been trying to find those things myself too, but every time I look it up, right, it's like, bone strength. Oh yeah, we're talking. And they talk about osteoporosis and all that stuff. I'm going, I don't care about density. Give me real, true. Yeah. So I think it's hard to find,
Okay.
only because of the lens everybody's looking through right now.
Yeah,
But
yeah, fair
I mean,
enough.
if you go like my website has the study on fragility score. If you want to just go there and grab that one, it may have I haven't read it in a long time, so it may have something there about the difference, because it is done without density.
Mhm.
So that's just at sonohealth.ca. If you go there and then go to the clinical button, the clinicians button, anybody can go in there, but I just divided it just so that doctors, go in an area that's more interesting to them. So you can go in there and then you'll see all the studies.
Okay. And
Mhm,
my second question, the graph that you had
mhm.
showing, I guess it was comparing, you had fragility scores versus density scores. Now, was that just some internal data that you had taken?
Yeah, that's just as I said, don't look at the numbers too much. I just was sort of expressing sort of the level of importance that one had over the other. That when you're figuring out fragility, well, fracture risk, density plays a role, but it's quite diminished to what is the current model.
Yeah. And just a side note, I've seen that clinically for years, by the way. So I think
Mhm,
you're spot on with your observation.
exactly.
Thank you
Well,
again.
and yeah, I mean, I see examples of them on my table, and they'll tell me, they'll say, I did this Superman fall, and I flew through the air, and I landed on concrete, and nothing happened to me. And we're just saying, well, you have osteoporosis. I said, with the current model, I said, see, you're proving the point is that the current model is faulty because you should have fractured something. I mean, if you're osteoporotic, you're apparently at high risk for fracture, but you didn't fracture.
Right.
And why? There's a reason why. I said, look at your fertility score, and I'd say 99 out of 100 of every one of those stories, every one of them have normal fragility scores.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Dave.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Before we move on, we're running a little over time and I've noticed a few folks just hopping off. So just wanted you to know that Dave is coming down to Albuquerque August 14th, 15th, and 16th. We will be doing a pop-up event with scans, and we are currently scheduling appointments. We only have 54 slots, and we've already booked at least a quarter of those. So if you are interested or you know someone that you want to recommend, please have them get in touch with me. You can also call me directly, which I'll put my number in the chat in just a second. I'll be happy to answer any questions or get you scheduled in for your scan. Okay, moving on.
I had one more question
Oh,
for
go ahead.
Dave, just things that we've heard since talking to clients, which is if you've had a hip replacement or Harrington rod from scoliosis, can you do a REM scan?
The Harrington rod, yes, I've done them a few times already. The hip replacement, no, there's no bone left, so it's all titanium, and other metals. But yeah, you can't do it. So if you've only had one hip, we can do the other hip. But if you've had both hips, we can only do the spine.
Super. Thank you for addressing that.
Yeah.
And Any other questions in the chat?
Yes, we have another question from Dr. Blackstein. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
So have you seen impact on REMS with any medications for osteoporosis, such as Fosamax or time loss? Yeah, time loss? I haven't heard of that one, but yes, there are many medications for
Yeah.
osteoporosis. So can you speak to results that you've seen?
Well, I mean, those are designed to increase your density only. Unfortunately, one of the sad side effects is it's going to decrease your fragility. So that's exactly. And I keep telling my clients, like everybody there, I say, like they'll say, well, should I just get off the drugs? And I'm not here to tell you what to do, but I'll say, for me, I would never touch them. I said, I know what they do, I know what they don't do, and I know what the side effects of them are. And it's completely against what you're trying to do, right? So I don't know why you'd want to take anything that weakens your bone. That makes no sense to me. So I have we seen any results? I mean, we're probably going to see decreased fragility scores if you're on Fosamax. We'll see increased density scores, of course, but again, to what end, right? I mean, you're increasing your density, yay for you, but you know, if your fragility's dropping down through the floor, sorry to tell you, but there's not enough. In my mind, there's not enough for density in the world to protect you if your fragility is fragile.
And so we just have a clarification that Timeless is actually designed to improve microarchitecture. So
Okay. Well, if that's the case, then yeah, I would suspect, like, we'd have to follow it, right? We'd have to do follow-up studies on those, but yeah, I would suspect then if that's actually what it's doing with no other side effects, which is hard to believe, but if that's what it's doing, its primary use, then I would say you might see increased fragility scores, which would be great. I mean, but the way if for people to understand sort of the difference between density and fragility, think of your house, and the fragility is the framing of your house. Okay, you can't really see it. And the density is all the drywall and the brick and the siding, and that gives your house a little bit more strength to it, but it's not going to stop it. It's not going to stop it from falling over if inside the walls your framing is weak, right? Yeah, the house is going to fall over regardless of what you put in it. But when you take all that off, your house isn't very dense. You can see right through it, right? And so that's the low density component, but the fragility is still there. So you can have low density, high fragility, low fragility or high strength, and still have healthy bone.
Amazing.
I've seen it. I've seen so many examples of it that it's impossible to now ignore.
Wonderful. Do we have any other questions out there? You can even just, do a little dance on your screen. There's Carol. I see you over there, Carol. Any questions? Okay, well, we have a few. So, one thing was we just wanted to speak to the technology and the operator error. Could you speak a little bit about the AI machine component and why that element's been removed in terms of the error percentage?
So, okay, so if I'm understanding your questions, you want me to talk about how the operator error has decreased so much?
Yeah, because of the AI technology built in.
Yeah, well, that's removing the radiologist, right? Most radiologists pride themselves in having the best way to report things. And I'm not against rats. I love rats. I work with lots of them. I just know, they don't take well to an automated reporting system because that's their training, as they're supposed to be able to report things. So they tend to not. They will be the last, I think, bastion of of supporters for DEXA, because that's in their whole wheelhouse. It's like, well, we don't need you to report this anymore. That's hard for a radiologist to swallow, and I understand that. Being a sonographer, I wouldn't want to have an automated sonography machine. I don't think you could build one, but I wouldn't want one because then I'm useless, right? So, but there's tons of other stuff for them to report. So, you know, let the DEXA do body composition.